Hello witches and wizards, we're going to do something a little bit different for you guys today, and instead of being out and about looking for things, I'm going to talk about why we don't see certain things and why you see more things of one and less of another. And I'm not talking just about severity level. Now obviously a low threat level is going to spawn significantly more than an emergency threat level, much to our chagrin. But even within the different threat levels, there's a pretty wide variance of spawn rates. Now, one thing that I do want to make abundantly clear is my research data is over like 3,300 data points. To me, that's a lot. In the mathematical world, like you want millions and tens of millions in order to really come up with a statistical number. So my numbers can be skewed just a little bit. Keep that in mind. There's a couple of other things going that I want to discuss first. And that is the only way to truly know the spawn rates is to have the code. Like that is that. The other way to have the most accurate data is to collect data from people who catch every single thing no matter what. And why that's important is because, for example, and I'll give you two, but for example, before I headed off to Vancouver, we got a new registry page, the Hogwarts Quidditch stands. Well, within that are two high threat levels, and you can tell high threat levels because they have the gold beacon of light above them. Well, I wanted to save the Luna for potentially getting a stamp in Vancouver. The others, which are the Golden Snitch and the Nimbus 2000, the other high threat levels within this family of magical games and sports, I knew I didn't need. And so for the past week or so, I just did not encounter any of those high threat levels. So it's going to skew the data a little bit. Another way that you can think about this is if you happen to see the Hogwarts school foundable on the ground and it has the gold beacon of light, you know what those are, right? It's either Peeves or it's Moaning Myrtle. I mean, that's it. Those are your only two options. And if you have both of those filled out, chances are you probably just say, I already know what that is, and you skip over it. So there's no official record of that having ever spawned. So when I give you these numbers, just know that through no fault of mine, and the reason why this data isn't going to be 100% accurate like it would be if people caught every single thing or you had the data from the code is those inherent things such as that, where you see something you're like, I already have those. And it's mostly going to play out with the high threat levels. I pretty much imagine any severe or any emergency people are going to try to catch, and therefore it'll show up as a scene anyways. So keep that in mind when I go through these numbers. Like I said, this is going to be over almost 3,300 encounters, so keep this in mind. There are 4 low threat levels: the Chudley Cannons player, the Gobstone set, the Magical Megaphone, and the Quaffle. And what I did is I went and broke it down by scene, percent of the page, because we have 4 different pages, and then percent of the total family. So throughout all of the magical games and sports, what are the percentages of this? And like I was talking about earlier, all 4 of these are low threat levels. And in fact, they're all the same low threat level because they all have the same 60% win rate. But the scene rates vary widely, and there's a very good explanation for that. So you have the Gobstone set and the Magical Megaphone, which on the page are going to be in like the 37-38% of all spawns. For total family, they're going to be the most at basically 22% of the total spawns each. So kind of between those, it's almost 50%. It's like 45% of total spawns are either going to be your Gobstone set or your Magical Megaphone. But what about the Chudley Cannons player and the Quaffle? Why on the page are they just like 10% and 9% of the spawns, and for the total family they're hanging out around the 5 and 6%? Well, that's pretty easy because those two are also available in port keys, which is why you see the basically like the 30% spawn rate over the other low threat levels. Finally, on that first World Cup's grounds page, you have the Quidditch World Cup, which is also a port key foundable and a wild foundable. 5% of the total family, like 3%. So this first page right here, there were about 2,000 foundables, and they made up about 58% of the total foundables for this family. Moving on to the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch, the first thing that I want to note here is the Quidditch pitch stands are completely left off of this because they are only available in wizarding challenges. They don't spawn and they don't come out in port keys. So keep that in mind. There are no numbers for this. So I'm looking at 3 medium threat levels: the Exploding House of Snap Cards, the Beater's Bat, and the Bludger. And then we have the Golden Snitch, which is a high threat level, and Quidditch Keeper Ron, which checks in as our first severe. What you will notice here is between the 3 medium threat levels, you have like 22%, 30%, and about 32% of that page's spawns coming from those. Over the entire family, like 8%, 12%, and 12%, 11 and 12%, somewhere in there, which is significantly higher than the Quidditch World Cup, which is also a medium threat level, but is also found in port keys. So you see that trend holding up where you're looking at anywhere from, on my notes, you're like 2 to 4 times more often that they spawn if they are not something that comes out of a port key. Then we go to the Golden Snitch. The Golden Snitch makes up about 14.5%, 15% of this page's total spawns, and about 5.5% of the total family spawns. And that 5.5% is actually higher than the Quidditch World Cup. And if you think about if people are skipping over these, it's probably even higher than that. So the Quidditch World Cup, even though it is a medium threat level, is going to spawn at a really reduced rate over a higher threat level in the Golden Snitch. And in fact, over the entire family, the Golden Snitch's spawn rates are closer to that of the low threat levels that also show up in port keys. And finally, we have the Quidditch Keeper Ron, our only severe on this page, and it's going to check in at less than 2% of this page's spawn and less than 1% of total family spawns. So you can start to see the wide variance in spawns between severity level. And I really don't think people are skipping over severes. So I feel like that number is probably pretty accurate. Whereas I feel like the high threat levels, there's some variance and some margin for error built into those. Then we move on into the third page. Just to note, the Quidditch Through the Ages book and the Tri-Wizard Cup, both wizarding challenges only. They are not included in these stats. We have the Nimbus 2000, which is available in port keys, and it's going to spawn at about a 1.5% rate. Again, that's probably going to be higher when you take into account people skip over the high threat levels. But then you have the Goblet of Fire, a severe threat level that also spawns from port keys or is obtained through port keys. And you're looking at about a 0.25% chance of those spawning, which is going to be about a third of the chance of the Quidditch Keeper Ron, which does not come into a port key. And then you have the only emergency within the magical games and sports, and that is going to be the Quidditch Captain Harry Potter. You're looking at about a 0.43% spawn rate, which is actually higher than the Goblet of Fire. So again, we see that same little pattern holding up where if something spawns in the wild and through port keys, that the rates are significantly lower than those of a higher severity that don't also spawn out of port keys. And then finally, we have the fourth page, which is brand new. I'm going to omit the Gryffindor banner because it is only available in wizarding challenges. You have 1 medium threat level, Seamus, and these are all new. I think they've been out a week, 10 days, not very long. So these numbers are going to be drastically lower than everything else that we've seen so far, and none of them are available in port keys that we know of. So you have the Seamus, which is about 61% of this page's total spawns. It comes in at just under 1% of the entire family spawns. And then you have Neville and Luna, which are basically going to be about the same. It looks like they're in the 19 to 20% range as far as total family spawns, looking at like 0.27 and then 0.24. And then the one additional severe is going to be Hermione, and like 0.003 of the total spawn rates. So like Austin Powers said, well, what does it all mean, Basil? Well, here's kind of what all of this means to me. It means that if something is going to spawn in the wild and spawn in a port key, you're pretty much not really going to ever see it in the wild. So just accept that. But what you can do to help improve your odds of finding those higher threat levels is by farming in other nests. Now, I know I did a video yesterday where I said The spawns are wackadoo. They're all over the place. If I'm in a nest, it doesn't appear to be holding true. But I went to a nest today and everything seemed to be on the up and back normal again. Let me know in the comments below if you're noticing that as well. Maybe the spawn mechanics were the way they were supposed to be, and then a bug came in with the Brilliant event that caused a change in the way we know nests to behave. And now that the Brilliant event is over, maybe everything is back to normal, which would really be nice, to be totally honest. But if you're looking for some of these higher threat levels, you're gonna have better odds of finding what you need within those other nests. And I think it also really shows an emphasis on port keys and how much port keys can help you. And I know port keys they're just completely random as to what you get, but you really need to be churning out those port keys. I know I have like 7 ready to go right now that I just don't open. And yeah, as long as you're opening one, you should be good. But I think they've really kind of put premium and an emphasis on burning through port keys and getting them open, because you need the Chudley Cannons players. You need the Quidditch World Cup in order to complete these pages and get them up to the gold level. But then as far as the harder pages, like the Triwizard's Maze page, you also need those Goblets of Fires, and you also need those Nimbus 2000 in order to complete those registries. So anyway, that's kind of a broad overview. I know these numbers are not going to be exact. They are, I will tell you that the numbers from the 4 or 5 different people that I've pulled and combined with my numbers, they're very similar across the board. But again, I do want to just reiterate that this is a relatively low sample size, and I know I personally skip over a lot of high threat levels, which I'm not going to do anymore. I'm actually going to try to start catching all of those. But again, I just think personally, I think it's pretty fascinating to see why I see so much of one thing and not as much of another. Let me know in the comments below as well. Are there any of these numbers that are shocking to you? Like, wow, like that is not my experience at all. So far, we don't have any concrete information saying that there are regionals in the game. It sounds like regionals are only going to be oddities, but we've also heard Niantic and Warner Brothers say multiple times that weather and weather patterns and moon phases affect the game. I live in a desert biome. Maybe you live somewhere where it rains a lot, so we're gonna have completely different spawn habits, potentially. And therefore your numbers may be slightly different than mine, but enough different to say, hey, you know what? It rains here a lot, which it doesn't for me. And I see more of XYZ than what Fodder showed on his screen. So I will put a link to my spreadsheet down in the description below. But if you see anything that just stands out as being, wow, our numbers don't line at all, let me know. I have a feeling oddities are the only ones that really play off the weather and the moon phases, but I'm not willing to give up on it just yet. I hope you guys found this video informative, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to see what you guys have that is totally different than what I have, because that's how you start learning more mechanics of the game. That's all I've got for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So until next time.